welcome to the program. I'm Analyst in Lagos. We begin with the latest Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But this time, the German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius today said that there was no disunity among allies about sending heavy battle tanks to Ukraine, and stressed that Berlin would act quickly if there was a positive decision to do so. Speaking alongside Secretary General of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, Mr. Pistorius said it is not the case, as portrayed over and over again, that there is no unity or that Germany is isolated. He said there is an ongoing evaluation process in the member countries, which is carried out in different ways, but the meeting in Ramstein last Friday showed very clearly that there are countries which are just as careful in their evaluation as is the Chancellor. Mr. Stoltenberg told reporters he was confident the alliance would find a solution soon on the delivery of battle tanks to Ukraine.
We discussed the issue of battle tanks. Consultations among allies will continue, and I'm confident that we will have a solution soon. Germany plays a key role in our alliance. The Zeitenwende announced by Chancellor Scholz is historic. Russia is preparing for new offensives. We need to enable the Ukrainians soon or fast to be able to repel those offensives, and also enable them to liberate their own territory. Battle tanks are, of course, important, both to be able to repel Russian new offensives, but also for Ukraine to be able to retake territory, to win and to prevail as a sovereign, independent nation in Europe. The only way to lasting peace is to make it clear to Putin that he will not win on the battlefield. Therefore, we must provide heavier and more advanced systems, so that Ukrainian forces are able to repel the Russian forces, not only to survive, but to win, take back territory, and prevail as a sovereign, independent state in Europe. The bravery of the Ukrainian forces has inspired the whole world. At the same time, we should not underestimate Russia. President Putin has proved that he is willing to pay a high price for this unjust war. He has mobilized over 200,000 troops and is acquiring new weapons from other authoritarian regimes such as Iran and North Korea.
Meanwhile, armed forces of Ukraine held military drills yesterday at a training ground in the country's southeastern Zaporizhzhia region. Servicemen were seen driving a top infantry fighting vehicle as others were firing rifles, loading anti-tank grenade launchers in trenches. Drills were staged as Russia's defense ministry said for the second straight day that its forces were improving their positions in Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia region. It claimed to have inflicted casualties and destroyed equipment, including Ukrainian fighting vehicles, howitzers, and 2 US-made HIMARS rockets. But Ukraine had said Russia's claims of progress in Zaporizhzhia were exaggerated. Fighting in recent weeks has centered around the town of Bakhmut, eastern Ukraine, where Russia's Wagner mercenaries and the Ukrainian forces have been locked in a battle of attrition. Neither side has claimed major improvements in the southern front since November, when Russia pulled out of the city of Kherson. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that changes in senior positions in government and in the regions would be made within a day. The president had previously pledged to crack down on corruption at all levels amid a series of allegations of bribe-taking and dubious practices.
There are already personnel decisions, some today, some tomorrow, regarding officials of various levels in the ministries and central government structures, as well as in the regions and in the law enforcement system. There's a principled decision of the National Security and Defense Council regarding the departure of officials abroad. It applies to all officials of the central authorities, various other levels of local government. It applies to law enforcement officials people's deputies, prosecutors, and all those who have to work for the state and within the state. If they want to rest now, they will rest outside the public service. Officials will no longer be able to travel abroad for vacation or for some other non-governmental purpose. Another decision of the National Security and Defense Council today concerns our spiritual independence, which we are strengthening and will continue to strengthen. Sanctions were introduced against 22 people, citizens of Russia, who under the guise of spirituality support terror and genocidal policy.
That was his late-night message. Well, that tomorrow, he said, there is today, where several senior Ukrainian officials have resigned amid a shake-up of personnel across his government. A key presidential advisor, the Deputy Defense Minister and Deputy Prosecutor General, left their post today. Mr. Zelensky has signaled that more top officials may be on the way out as he hopes to clamp down on corruption. One of the officials, Krylo Tymoshenko, was implicated in scandals over his use of expensive cars. Mr. Zelensky was responding to key public demand that justice should apply to everyone. Now, the corruption crackdown follows reports in Ukrainian media that the country's defense ministry paid inflated prices with a relatively unknown firm for food supplies. Meanwhile, another minister was arrested on bribery charges. Mr. Zelensky has already banned top government officials from leaving the country, and the first to resign today was Mr. Tymoshenko, the president's deputy head of office, who oversaw regional policy and had earlier worked on Mr. Zelensky's election campaign. Let's move over to Russia now, where one of its richest tycoons has called on the authorities to tolerate rather than punish hundreds of thousands of workers who have fled abroad due to Moscow's actions in Ukraine, arguing that the country needs their brain power. He said Moscow had to be tolerant even if remote workers held views which Russian patriots disliked, a reference to the fact that many of those who left, including its specialists, did so to avoid being drafted into the army or because they disagreed with what Moscow calls its special military operation in Ukraine. Mr. Putin is estimated to be Russia's richest or second richest person, thanks to his stake in metals giant Nonikel.
For us, for our country. Люди уехали. У них, наверное, на это были какие-то причины. People have left. They must have had some reasons for it. Some people agree with it, some not. But they, most of them, continue to work for us, for our country, for our economy, for their companies. Some of them will return, some not. Why would you push them away? Why would you prosecute them? They will just find jobs elsewhere. They were not born yesterday. Why would you indiscriminately whip them away? They are our strength, not our weakness. Their brains, the ability to make products, which we are catastrophically short of. It's time we ended this rant. There are people who are enemies, who do harm and cause damage to the country. They may be here or there. They must face trial. Their guilt must be proven and punished according to the law. But those who think differently must be assessed by their inputs into our common work.
Их надо судить, доказывать их вину и соответствующим образом по закону наказывать.
Or maybe perhaps in response, the Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov today revealed that we have already said that the country is very much interested in having those qualified people return to Russia. Of course, it is in our interest to create the right conditions for them to return. He said we certainly need to work with them so that they carry on working for the good of Russian companies and in the end for the good of the Russian state. Senior analyst, SBM Intelligence Confidence Makari, joins me now for more on all that's happening with this war. High confidence. First, let's start with the resignations amid the corruption allegations in Kyiv's government. Are you surprised that this is coming now?
Well, it's not surprising. Ukraine was lambasted by Western press as somehow the most corrupt states in Eastern Europe. They are spreading between Western and Eastern Europe. It has been like that for some time. Even the former president that was in office before Zelensky took over was accused of a level of corruption. In 2016, the government law that mandated MPs, members of parliament rather, to declare their assets found out that MPs were declaring a total net worth of about $460 million for just 413 MPs. So when you put this in a broader context, the kind of backyard Ukraine is operating on, being a former Soviet state with oligarchies, political corruption, and several other things, the allegation that is coming out is not so shocking. But the whole world dynamics make it a little bit shocking for people who are not so aware of the kind of politics and the policies that Ukrainian politicians and officials are kind of involved in. So it's not entirely different from the Russian scenario. So, but the fact that it is fighting a war doesn't necessarily mean that it's clean of the kind of political corruption that its enemies involved in. So it's for some other people, it's just another day.
Yeah, but one would think that with all that's going on with this war that they are fighting, that they will be united and perhaps channel all their resources to fighting and winning. Some of the allegations we understand include food supplies, the military's food supplies, a bribe worth over $350,000 of a supply of electric generators and much more. We also know that in the 2021 Transparency International, they ranked the country, that's Ukraine, 122 out of 180 countries. And we also know that that is to advance its application to the EU, the bloc. It needs to keep its slate clean or cleaner. Do you think that they could still succeed with all that's going on?
Yes. If you look at the European Union's history of corruption, it is not all that squeaky clean or also different from what Ukraine is currently doing. Before, at the end of the World Cup, a senior member of European Parliament from Greece was actually arrested and forced to resign from the EU Parliament for taking bribes from Qatari officials to advance Qatar's World Cup bid. And so corruption is not just a single problem for poorer countries in Eastern Europe or many parts of Africa or even in the third world. It's something that even the European Union officials are also guilty of. It's still on the Qatar World Cup bid. The documentary on Qatar's bid by Netflix that was released just a few days before the World Cup found out that even members of parliament from France or members of even the French government under Nicolas Sarkozy received bribes in various forms to allow Qatar to host the World Cup in 2022. So, but for Ukraine, I do think that the kind of pedestals that the EU has set for it to join the European Union will not be that much hard. And even if Ukraine do not meet the normal threshold for corruption reduction to join the EU, I think the general goodwill for many EU countries to join is always there. It's going to propel them to the finish line. But the question will come down to politics. Is Hungary willing to let go of its veto to allow Ukraine to join the EU? That's just the main question. It's not even mostly about the corruption that's in Ukraine right now.
Let's come to another raging issue, the controversy surrounding the Leopard 2 tanks deliveries to Ukraine. What's your take on it? And this is even though we keep hearing, like we heard today, Germany's defense minister say over and over again, it's not true that Germany is isolated or that there is no unity.
So what you should understand about the Leopard 2 tanks is simply this. The German military-industrial complex is not as strong as what you have in the West. So Germany was able to make money out of selling Leopard 2 tanks to about 30 countries in Europe. And so according to defense agreements, some of these weapons need permission from the original owners before they are distributed to a third party. So the German government refusing to give T2 tanks, Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine, first of all, is a strategic decision. In the first place, the US is one of the countries that are pressuring them, apart from Poland, to give the tanks to Ukraine. One of the first things you have to understand is that if Germany goes ahead to sign up with that deal, many of those countries who have German Leopard T2 tanks are going to have those tanks replaced by American tanks. It is going to kill the strategic business relationship Germany has with those countries. So this is exactly what Germany is trying to avoid. So there's a lot of talk about how those tanks are going to change the tide of the war. We are yet to see it. There have been so many other weapons that have been deployed to Ukraine, which of course it's been said that is going to change the tide of the war. The war is currently in a war of attrition where anything can move. And many things are moving. In the first place, we heard that the Russian mercenary group, Wagner Group, has taken hold of Solidar in Bakhmut. So not many advances have been made by Ukraine in the past 1 month. So the Leopard 2 tanks are being hailed as a Hail Mary, but I don't think that it goes far beyond that. And even if you go back to the politics that is refusing Germany to hand over those tanks to Ukraine, it simply has to do with what Germany is trying to avoid. In the first place, it's trying to avoid an escalation of the conflict, hoping that the conflict is going to end in the negotiating table, because giving those tanks is going to escalate it even more. And then on one faction of the German coalition currently running the government in Berlin, the SPD doesn't want that to happen. And Elena Baerbock, who is the foreign minister, is of the Greens, who of course has avowed more support for Ukraine than even the SPD has. So there is that schism in the German government, and even despite the fact that Poland has officially made a request for Germany to allow them to hand over those tanks to Ukraine, I don't think that's any much headway. I do think, though, that a compromise will be reached. Germany is going to allow those tanks to be sent to Ukraine, but the overall strategic imperative in the future is what Germany is trying to avoid, and it may not actually come out of this in a good way.
And just before I let you go, the Kremlin is asking qualified Russians who have moved abroad to return. Will they return, do you think? Could they be forced to return?
I don't think so. Not many Russians that are outside of the Russian media and the Russian government which actually agree with this war. Even if they do, they're not as vocal as you would expect. And when the last mobilization took place within Russia, a lot of them actually refused to join. Many of them fled to Norway. Some of them fled to all those other states that are bordering Russia in the east, Lithuania, Latvia, and the rest of them. So it wasn't really like a consensus opinion among many Russian people that the Russian government had to rely on mass mobilization, forced mobilization in the manner of speaking to get there, to go there. So many Russian diaspora citizens understand that any kind of return to Russia at this point is going to aid the war process. Many of them do not want that. Many of them do not like the war effort, but they are not that confident to come up to the public to say so, because as of last week, a teenager, a young girl from one of Russia's eastern region was arrested for a dissent on the war posted on a TikTok channel. So many of them do not actually want to return, but it will actually be it will be interesting to see how the Russian government tries to spin this thing going forward to get many people to return. But on the interim, it's not actually looking good for them.
Senior Analyst, SBM Intelligence, Confidence Makari, many thanks for talking to us on this issue.
Thank you for having me once again.
In the meantime, dozens of people gathered outside the European Council yesterday to call on EU foreign ministers to deliver German-made Leopard tanks to Ukraine. Germany's Leopard tanks, fielded by armies across Europe, are widely seen as the best fit for Ukraine, but Berlin must authorize their sale and has yet to do so.
Give us Leopards.
And we're here to first ask for more weapons to Germany personally for Leopards, and also for the Minister of Foreign Affairs. We're asking to include in the 10th packet of sanctions ban on Russian diamonds, lower price cap for Russian oil, and also ban on Russian nuclear energy. Ukraine needs those weapons to make sure that we will retake our occupied territories. Right now it's horror on the occupied territories. It's not like occupied and peaceful. People are being tortured, children are being stolen away and brought to Russia. So it's not a matter of territories, it's what happens to our people. And in order to help us liberate our people, we need to have aggressive, offensive weapons. We cannot protect ourselves into victory.
Ukrainian fifth grader Mykola Zuba huddled with his peers for a language lesson recently inside an unusual classroom, a tattered makeshift tent on the barren steppe of Ukraine's war-scarred eastern Kharkiv region. He says they sit there for around 2 or 3 hours, sometimes just for an hour in the wind-rattled structure. Zuba's school went into distance learning mode after the area was liberated from Russian occupation last September. December during a Ukrainian counter-offensive that prompted him and his friends to seek out their own spaces for learning. He said they collected the materials such as tarp, sand, logs from around their homes and the neighborhood, and that mobile coverage was good enough to attract their classmates to the tent, which sits under the shadow of a water tower. The students listen to lectures, send assignments back and forth to their instructor via messaging apps. Still to come on the program.